13th of February 2024. I'm here. I'm Dana. Hope you're doing well. You can call in at 709-589-4406. 4406. Live. Call into the live show. Hope everybody had a great day. Some of us are going to get a bunch of snow tomorrow. Our forecast went from 10 to 15, to 15 to 20, to 20 to 25, to 25 to 30, 35 to 40, to 40 to 45. And the wind's done the same thing. Now we're up to 85 kilometers an hour for tomorrow morning, and which is 50-something miles per hour. Oh, yeah, it's coming, all right. It's going to be hellish. Blizzard in the morning, blizzard in the afternoon, blizzard in the evening. And it's going to snow all week, too. So if I don't show up tomorrow night, it's because we got no power. But if we got power, I will be here. We got some rather entertaining stuff tonight. Hi, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Everybody's doing great. Except for the nuclear industry. Hope you fall down and break your bloody neck. And we're just going to jump right into the news cycle. Remember, the nuclear industry is insane. The universities, the medias are all out there claiming that the majority of the media in 2013 was inside of Fukushima Reactor 4. They've done the same thing in 2021 for Reactor 3, by the way. But this is 2013 where they're pretending they're in a building that actually doesn't even exist. So don't go looking to your media to be enlightening. They're going to gut you right on the spot. A study shows that a drop in cancer incidences after the closure of the Sacramento reactor may warrant a full review of other low-level radiation risk. So if there's a drop in cancer, it not may warrant it, it warrants, right? We got a video of this Senator Hawley. I'm going to butcher his name because I'm good with that kind of stuff. And it's quite an enlightening video about the RECA Act. Radiation Compensation Act, I should say. France tells Britain to cough up, and we'll get that in about 7, 8, 9 minutes, maybe less, depending on how much I stumble and bumble through this. France tells Britain to cough up taxpayers' cash to fund nuclear power stations. Well, France says they were going to pay for it. Now, first off, if Britain's going to have a nuclear renaissance, they got to pay for it. They're not going to have a nuclear renaissance unless they pay for it. Why are they depending on France to pay for their nuclear renaissance? It's very dubious, isn't it? And the taxpayers have already paid, to the monthly bills for millennium, not millennium, I suppose, Dana, but for many decades to replace the current power facilities. But the crazy batshit lunatic British are only interested in nuclear. Nuclear, as we know, in Britain, just it's the best way to bankrupt the country and starve all the pensioners out of existence. I'll take you back to a speech given by the nuclear minister. This was Conference of Parties, 28.
But I want to end by quoting the world's most famous nuclear power plant worker, Homer Simpson. TV's Homer Simpson, you know the guy I'm talking, yellow bloke, right? Homer Simpson liked to say that he was on a mission for fission. And colleagues, so are we. Thank you very much.
The world's most famous nuclear plant. Everybody's applauding. Oh, you're so brilliant, you're so clever. We denigrated into the stupider you are, the more quickly you get a raise and a promotion. Push for funding comes weeks after Hinkley Point costs were revised up to $46 billion, It's actually 58 billion USA dollars, the USD dollars, the American dollars, which is absurdness for 2 reactors. It's absurd. And every bit of material, it just keeps going. It went from 7 billion, the original estimate in 2007, to currently 58 billion. This industry is just a degenerate industry, isn't it? And these pictures for Sizewell don't do it justice. It's the biggest construction project in human history, first off. It's enough cement to pour sidewalk to Rome from United Kingdom. Like every speck of material goes to the site is triply inspected. To give you context, the majority of sites is barely inspected. When it comes to nuclear, everything is triple inspected because there's so much corruption, right? They got no choice. And even then, they can't keep up with the looting that goes on in the nuclear industry. 90% of nuclear money goes to administration. That's why it costs so much to pick up a rock at a nuclear site. You look inside the world's largest fusion reactor. Well, it's not a fusion reactor. It's ludicrous to suggest it's a fusion reactor. Calling it a fusion reactor suggests that fusion exists. It doesn't. The Japs town of Naka may hold a solution to humanity's climate crisis. Well, the solution is called geothermal. Why would you look at anything else? Like this is actually 2024. And they have drills now. The geothermal companies are this year mass producing bits that are not drill bits. There's many different companies, by the way, doing incredible techniques to get deep, quicker, easier, and deeper. And one of the best ones I've seen, there's a couple, I guess, but my favorite, because it's so simple, anybody can rig it, is a water jets at 25,000 psi, goes ahead of the drill bits. Well, it's in the same casing, right? And it splits the rocks at 25,000 psi. Then on the other side of it is pneumatic hammer, which will pulverize the rock, and then the drill bit comes down and just coast on through it. It's like 7-8 times quicker than the oil well drillers can drill. Bloop. Why would you use anything else but geothermal? You can back it up with wind and solar for peak energy, and there's tons of storage solutions, like water batteries, 2 aquifers where you pump water up to the top one, and when you need it, you let it come down. And the other one is compressed air storage. You dig mine shafts and just compress air down there. So every community can do geothermal and have it up and running in 6 or 8 months. Why would you look at anything else? Because the nuclear industry has sabotaged everything. A town 80 miles north of Tokyo may hold the answer. Well, 200 kilometers east of Tokyo is the Ishikawa Prefecture, Noto, which just had a 3,000-year-old fault line rupture and dropped over 40,000 homes, destroyed 55,000. Yeah, and hydrogen is the solution to the problems. That's right. James, thank you. This is very important because you got to have both. You can't just have geothermal, Dana. Smarten up, Dana. Because you got to be able to power cars. You can't power cars with geothermal, Dana. I don't know why I can't. I'm so fixated on large power plants that I forget there's another side to the economy that I got to keep in the lexicon. First off, don't believe anything the Japanese tell you. Here's an example. Japanese are telling you that these esteemed journalists, you got ABC Cecilia Vega, who's now in a press club at the White House in the United States, from Australia, the biggest media in Australia. You got Rupert Winfield Hayes from the BBC, where Jimmy Savile raped something like 1,200 children or whatever. And you got CBS Seth Dorn, which is a senator's son, for goodness sakes. and scumbag CNN, pretending they're in a building that don't exist. This is just a fraction. Like, don't believe anything the Japanese tell you, for goodness sakes. YouTube will censor me now for saying that, right? Whatever, I couldn't care less. If I can't say the truth, then I'll go somewhere else. Harnessing clean energy. This is not clean energy. Like, your timer is 360 million degree Fahrenheit temperatures. And you're going to boil water for a couple of million homes, right? If that flashes, what do you think is going to happen at 360? Like, they say, oh, no, it'll shut down right away. But you can't shut down 360 million degree Fahrenheit temperatures right away. You can't shut down that water that's boiling. You can't just switch that off right away. It's a ludicrous assertion, right? And then you got to use... and they admit that the magnets probably won't even work. A 6-story machine. This is the EU and Japan. Japan got tons of money for nuclear, got no money for their veterans, no money for healthcare, no money for schools, no money for infrastructure, no money for anything, just nuclear. Everything. Nuclear just sucks your life right out of your country. As soon as it invades your country, and it's very good at through the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is not a regulatory agency, by the way, they're just a corporation. Again, like, this doesn't work. They're suggesting this is the biggest fusion reactors, but it doesn't work. Right? There is no fusion reactor. Like, 3 years ago, they said they reaped energy back. It was a breakthrough. And so there's a lot of stories about it. And you know what I'm like. I'm going to read every one of them. And then it started showing up the very next day in many more stories that the energy they got back from 360 million degree Fahrenheit temperatures was equal to a 9-volt battery. And first off, just the static electricity is going to be equal to enough to power a small community at these temperatures. So to suggest that they reaped energy back and had an excess of enough to power a 9-volt battery like goes in your smoke detector, which has americium-241 in it, by the way. That's the quickest way to store something, is put it in your house and you throw it in the dump after. Can you imagine, like, they're making billions of these smoke detectors every year with americium-241 from a nuclear chain reaction. So how much, if you take billions of these little pieces, now you're talking about huge amounts of tonnages of americium. This is unbelievably dangerous radioactive isotope. Don't let your children play with a smoke detector that you took down, not even for a second, folks. Did you hear the nuclear power plant sirens? What was it? When is the next siren test? I don't know if I've ever seen a headline framed that way. I just felt stupid the second I read the headline. I almost gave up on the story. All 91 sirens within the 10-mile radius of the St. Lucie nuclear power plant sounded Tuesday morning. 91 sirens. They were put there after 3 Mile Island as a concession. There was 100 nuclear reactors cancelled after 3 Mile Island. They poisoned everybody. If you go in my videos, you can watch presentations I've done on 3 Mile Island. Shocking what they've done. The cancer clusters. And cancer is just one of many, many illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries and illnesses. Heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline. There's all kinds of horrific illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries. EU would need owned a nuclear deterrent if Trump wins. Trump made a stupid statement, apparently. Or, knowing the media, they just took it out of context, right? We've seen them do that so many times. Like, I'm not on anybody's side. I'm just on anybody that's honest. The European Union may need its own nuclear deterrent because it can't rely on NATO. Well, NATO's not even supposed to exist. Look up NATO, and what you're going to see, it's going to say 28 militaries. It's going to say that right on the search page. NATO, 28 militaries. They were created in response to the Soviet Union. So when the Soviet Union crumbled and everybody lost their pensions and patents, they should have got rid of NATO at the same time, shouldn't they? Under the terms, because like when Soviet Union fell, it wasn't just Soviet Union. The political, you're talking about people's pensions were gone. You're talking about the patents of the country are gone and were replaced by, no doubt, whichever invader caused that to happen. And we all know who that was, of course. Under the terms of so-called nuclear umbrella, the U.S. provides deterrent and protection for NATO countries in return for them not pursuing their own nuclear weapons program. They want to be completely dependent upon the military-industrial complex, right? Which is United Nations. This is what Eisenhower called United Nations. And George Bush called it United Nations military-industrial complex multiple times in a single speech. Let me see if I can find that. Come on, Dan, everyone knows you can find it. Isn't that so pathetic? I'm so predictable. Here's the pig, George W. Bushy. I'm going to try to adjust the volume for you on my side.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
So he called the United Nations the New World Order multiple times because they're the New World Order. And you're not allowed to do nothing now without permission from the United Nations, no matter which country you're in. Anything happens, you got to go to the United Nations website to find out what you're allowed to do. How the hell did we ever get in that position? And they're the worst thing that could happen to humanity. And certainly look what they done to North Korea when they changed their name from League of Nations to United Nations. They dropped more munitions than the entire World War II on little tiny North Korea, who was occupied for 50 years before that by the Japanese. Then they left because of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This was unusual. Council leader rejects nuclear waste disposal plan. And bless her heart, what the hell? They're going to assassinate her. The leader of East Riding of Yorkshire Council said she will not be supporting plans for nuclear waste disposal in the country. They're going to build it under the ocean because they know that it's going to melt down at some point, and then the ocean goes in there. And then whoever is in a nuclear industry at that time gets 100 years before the truth finally comes out. Which is what's happening off Fukushima. It's the same thing, right? They cemented that whole harbor, that artificial harbor they have there. Nuclear Waste Services, which is the newest, greatest, great British nuclear scam, has identified, which is insane because they just got created. Now they're like running with the baton. Had identified South Holderness as a potential site for a geological disposal facility. And I covered that quite a bit last night. Actually, there's a number of stories last night about it. Two local Conservative councillors, Lynn Healing and Sean McMasters, has also put forward a motion for the authority to end any discussion about the proposal. So not only has she turned her back on it, thank goodness, but two local Conservative councillors have submitted a motion for the authorities to end any discussion about putting nuclear waste under the community and under the ocean. It's absurd that we're talking about putting nuclear waste under the ocean. This is an absurdness. So these are the same as the Americans, Canadians, deep geological repositories. They just have a different name on it, right? Would see nuclear waste stored 3,280 feet over a kilometer underground, and officials claim it would create thousands of jobs. We always hear these connotations, right? Well, yeah, thousands of jobs. Someone's got to build it. And then, it's going to be hard for them to get the homeless to work in that environment, right? So you got to pay big wages. And the Nuclear Waste Services, which is just created, has never done anything in its life, and is now gung-ho to put all the nuclear waste under the ocean, which is the planet and the 8 million species are dependent upon our oceans. Like water is your most important resource, salt and fresh. You can't survive. There's not a single species on the planet can survive without water, without decent water. And the nuclear industry has destroyed literally that essence of life itself. Hawley, and it's not Hawk, it's Hawley, Hawley. I apologize if I butcher anybody's name. You got any idea how much crap I go through every single day? I'm usually pretty good, but once in a while it gets a little bit worried about. Anyway, he blasted Senate leadership for funding foreign wars while ignoring nuclear radiation victims in the United States. My God, we're going to have some snowstorm tonight in Memorial. It's going to be horrible. And I showed you, at the end of the show last night, I was showing you pictures of me plowing. It's going to be way worse. Now wait till you see the new videos that are coming. I don't know if they'll show. I guess they might show up tomorrow night if we still got power. Should nuclear power plants, also known as disease factories, that are surrounded by farms worldwide, be closed immediately? Well, if you do that, you close all nuclear power plants worldwide. And that's third, fourth, or fifth time now I've had that poll over the years. It's a very important poll because why are all nuclear power plants, except for a few, surrounded by farms? Because the fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation in every one of these sites. It's hemorrhaging. It's still splitting atoms, right? That's the problem with nuclear waste is splitting atoms, and you can't contain it because it's very volatile. And so then, if you put it in a containment, like a building, you try to contain it, the emissions. The gases will, not gases, but the noble gases and the radiation will build up inside it. Once you introduce oxygen in there, it'll detonate. You have to vent everything. That's why they have these tall stacks at nuclear disease factories. People call it power plants. But this is good. You're going to like this coming up. Tonight, U.S. Senator Josh Hawley delivered remarks, and I butchered his name, I apologize, delivered remarks on the Senate floor ahead of the expected votes on additional aid to Ukraine. And the Senator Josh blasted the Senate leadership for shoveling billions of dollars to foreign wars while ignoring Americans who have been poisoned by the federal government through its atomic program. Let's just talk about a few of these because we're going to play this video coming up. It's very important stuff, actually. So, if you worked at Hanford for a single 8-hour shift, you're entitled to a pension, even if that was 75 years ago, and you got sick. And because you're now like 95 years old, you're sick or something, obviously. But you don't have to prove that you got sick at Hanford. You just have to prove you worked there for 8 hours. And or know somebody that worked there that can verify for you that's still alive today that you worked there. Then you're entitled to a pension. If not, a huge payout. This is specific for Hanford. And so Hanford, like a single 8-hour shift. Imagine you're working at a place for a single 8-hour shift 50 years ago and you're sick today. You don't have to prove that made you sick. You just got to prove you worked there and you're entitled to a pension, health care, or a large payout. I said bad because like radiation is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. If you take an atom of it, it's 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison, right? Your body attacks it every second for the rest of your life, eventually builds a sarcophagus around it. You calls it a tumor. But at the same time, you're compromising your immune system, so you're more susceptible to pathogens and viruses that were normally benign, right? Okay, let me go back to Hanford, and we'll continue with the rest of the story and play the video. Well, just a few clicks from the video. So Hanford dumped 450 billion grounds of waste that went through a chain reaction that is splitting atoms into the soil in non-lined trenches in Hanford. Now in Hanford, it's illegal to dump garbage in non-lined trenches. So they dumped 450 billion gallons. That washes, every time they have snowstorms and rain and everything else, that washes into the Columbia River, which is just slightly away from it and down all the way downhill, right? And that's equal to an aquarium 6 feet wide of nuclear sludge, 518 feet tall, 518 feet tall, 518 stories wrapped around the entire planet more than once. It's just from just one event they had there. So think of what China's done, Pakistan, India, and think of what the national laboratories have done to you. And you start realizing how much trouble we're actually in. We have enough money to make hundreds of millions of dollars to our taxpayers' funds available to the private sector. We got money without end. In fact, it's better just to play the video, because all of this is in the video generally. So let's play the video. How about that? Now I chopped the video up, so this is just a straight piece, right? It's unusual for me to find anybody that's very honest and is actually making all kinds of great points. How many videos of those people do I play on this site again? Anybody? Well, we don't, do we? In the last decade, I don't know if we've ever played anybody's video that was actually honest. Congratulations, Josh. So let's play that, because finally get to hear somebody else being honest is going to be interesting. I'll adjust the volume in my side in real time for you.
More money for Ukraine. We've spent $115 billion almost in Ukraine so far. This bill would commit tens of billions more. And to what end? Let me just offer a contrast, Mr. President. Not long ago, I was on this floor discussing the need, discussing the cries for justice from Americans in my state, in Arizona, Idaho, New Mexico, Texas, Wyoming, Tennessee, Kentucky, Alaska, Americans who have been exposed to nuclear radiation or radioactive waste by their own government going back decades. In my state, the city of St. Louis was used as a uranium processing facility at the very beginning of the Oppenheimer project, the Manhattan Project. We've all learned about this in greater detail thanks to that movie. But have we yet learned about the brave men and women in this country who gave their health and, in many instances, yes, their lives to see that project come to fruition? Well, we haven't when it comes to the brave men and women of Missouri, I can tell you that. St. Louis was a secret uranium processing site for years. And when the federal government shut down its uranium processing work in St. Louis, what did it do? Did it clean up the uranium? Did it clean up the nuclear waste? No, it didn't. Here's what it did. It put the waste into canisters, metal canisters, unsecured, set them out in open parking lots and other facilities, exposed to the elements, exposed to the wind and the rain and the weather for years on end, and then watched as those metal drums leaked nuclear waste right out of the drum, right down into the soil and right into the water, right into a creek. Coldwater Creek is its name, that runs through the greater St. Louis area from the center of the city out into the suburbs. And just as this was happening in the 1950s into the 1960s, what was happening to those suburbs? Well, people were moving out of city centers. They were moving to the suburbs. They were building homes. And where were they building their homes? Along this beautiful, picturesque creek that just so happens, Mr. President, to have been contaminated from the 50s forward with nuclear waste. Where did the waste come from? From the federal government. But that wasn't the only place in St. Louis that was contaminated. Now, the federal government also then decided that, you know what, maybe a way to get rid of this would be we'll just dump all of the waste in a public landfill. So that's what they did. Mr. President, they took the waste, some of it, to a public landfill without any controls, without any appropriate cleanup, and by the way, without informing the public, and they dumped it into the landfill along with everything else that was there, taking no precautions exercising no appropriate cleanup. They dumped it at another location called Laddie Avenue, and then there was yet another location called Weldon Spring, such that there are now multiple locations, all of these years later, in the city of St. Louis, and we're talking now about just one metropolitan area in this country. Multiple locations where nuclear waste has been dumped into the soil, dumped into the water, exposing people into the air, and for 50-plus years it has been going on. It continues as I stand tonight on this floor. Because how much of it has been cleaned up, Mr. President? None of it. Has the creek been cleaned up? No. Has the landfill been cleaned up? No. Has the second landfill at Weldon Spring, has it been cleaned up? No. Has Laddie Avenue been appropriately cleaned up? No. No, it has not. But what has happened is generations of residents of my state in St. Louis and then in St. Charles have played in that creek. They have gone to those schools. They have been exposed repeatedly to this nuclear radiation and waste, and they have developed cancers of many and various kinds, such that we lead the nation now in St. Louis County in breast cancer, in various childhood cancers. It's not natural, Mr. President. There's nothing normal about it. It's because of what the federal government has done and done for decades. Why do I mention it? Well, because the program that this government set up some years ago to compensate those Americans who have been exposed by their government to nuclear radiation is about to expire. And just a few months ago, I secured the approval of this body to renew it. We passed here on the floor of this body with a strong bipartisan vote, a renewal measure to make good on our promise to those Americans who've been exposed to nuclear radiation by their government, who've grown ill because of nuclear radiation by their government, who have died because of nuclear radiation by their government, to make good on our promise to help them. We passed it. We also included in that legislation relief for the people of St. Louis and St. Charles and others in Missouri, relief for the people of New Mexico and Arizona and Utah and others who were downwind of these tests that we saw so vividly portrayed in the Oppenheimer movie and elsewhere. And then what happened, Mr. President? Well, I'll tell you what happened. The National Defense Authorization Act, the defense bill, went to conference. And there, despite the strong bipartisan vote on this floor, there it was removed in a backroom deal. Senator McConnell and others led the charge to remove this provision. And what was the rationale? What were we told? Why was it that nuclear radiation victims from Missouri to Kentucky to Tennessee to Alaska cannot be compensated according to so-called leadership? What was the rationale, Mr. President? No, I remember it vividly. I've heard it. It rings in my ears every day. The rationale is we don't have the money. The rationale is it's too expensive to do right by the American people who have suffered and died because of their government's nuclear radiation program. The rationale was we can't possibly afford it. That was the rationale. And now, lo and behold, I turn, Mr. President, to this bill before us, and I find we seem to have unlimited sums of money when it comes to foreign wars. Good Lord, when it comes to funding the machinery of war, we have money, we have money, we have money that we couldn't possibly dream of. We can run the presses indefinitely if it's going to go overseas. If we're going to be paying foreign governments, why, we've got enough money, apparently, to send $8 billion direct to the treasury of Ukraine. My goodness, we have enough money to make hundreds of millions of dollars of our taxpayer funds available to the private sector in Ukraine. We are now literally funding their businesses, their banks, Lord knows what. We've got money without end. We've got enough money to pay for bureaucrats' salaries. We've got enough money to pay for Ukrainian government officials' pensions. We've got enough money for so-called humanitarian aid that gets funneled away from, siphoned off into any manner of corrupt uses. We won't know because we don't have a special inspector general to oversee this money, but that's a different story. Oh no, we've got plenty of money. And I have listened carefully to colleague after colleague of mine come to this floor and stand where I am now and say, it's so important that we spend this money on these overseas wars. We must spend the money. If we don't spend this money now, why, it may cost us more money in the future. No, it's imperative. It's imperative that we spend this money. Meanwhile, these same people turn to the citizens of Missouri and say, you're not worth a dime. They say, you can't have a penny. They turn to the residents of Kentucky and Tennessee and Alaska and New Mexico and Arizona and Utah and Texas, and they say, we don't care that you were poisoned. We don't have a dime for you. We have unlimited money for Ukraine. We're going to rebuild the borders of Ukraine. That's in this bill, but we don't have anything for you. We are probably, for all I know, paying for radiation exposure compensation for Ukrainians in this bill. We very well could be, Mr. President. We'll never know because there'll never be an accounting. But the contrast strikes me as not only stark, it strikes me as absurd. It strikes me as absurd. It's worse than that. It strikes me as grossly unjust. Listen, if you want to give money to overseas military operations, I think you're making a mistake when it comes to Ukraine. I think doing it without oversight is a serious mistake. I think doing it in a way that seriously harms our position in the Pacific, which is our most important foreign policy challenge, is a serious mistake. I think doing it before we secure our own border is a serious mistake. But given all of that, if you want to give money to foreign wars in Ukraine, that's one thing. But to turn around and say, we have plenty of money for that endeavor, we have unlimited sums of money for that endeavor, but we have nothing for the people in the United States of America, we have nothing for those who are sick and dying of cancer because of their government's action. To say that, Mr. President, is not only a juxtaposition that strikes the mind, to say that is manifestly unjust. To say that is wrong. To say that cannot be sustained, Mr. President. To say that is a scar on the conscience of this body. It cannot be that we have unlimited sums of cash for foreign wars and we have nothing for the needs of our own people who our own government has hurt and poisoned. That cannot be true in this country. It cannot be. Which is why, Mr. President, I will soon demand again that this body vote to make good on this government's commitment to help those whom its government has poisoned. But I hope and expect that when that time soon comes, we will not hear talk about how expensive it is to clean up after the federal government, how expensive it is for all of these Americans, hundreds of thousands of them who've been poisoned by the government, how expensive it is for them after we have been treated to speech after speech, hour upon hour, day upon day, of just how important it is to spend this money in Ukraine. If it's good enough for the Ukrainians, surely it's good enough for the American people. Surely, Mr. President, it is good enough for the American people.
Like that or what? That was fantastic. We've got one more clip of him. It's about a minute long coming up in a moment. Let's explore that for a second, though. This model is a pretty old model. It's 1951 and 1962 radioactive fallout from the nuclear war. Weapons testing. It's the same bombs, the same radioactive fallout, but it's weapons testing. Each of the lines you see in there are at least two tests where the wind blew the same way. And that's completely dishonest. And I'll explain that statement, actually. Consider doing some clicking if you like. And if you don't like it, you better click. And if you click, you get a cookie. YouTube will send it to you. Oh, I didn't have it up there, did I? Come on, Danny, get your act together. So think of the nuclear industry as a creature, as an actual monster, as someone with bad intentions. Just bad intentions, right? and then leave them unchallenged for their entire legacy, and do the math on that, and say, what's the worst case scenario? Well, the worst case scenario is an extinction level event. They brainwash your children through like the Hulk and Spider-Man and Spider-Man. What the hell is Spider-Man? Come on, man, get it together, Dana. And then they have all these other heroes, Krypton, of course, Diddley Isotope. And they just lull your children, and then by proxy you, in increments over many decades, over 80 years, into complacency. And so you can't keep up with the heroes, right? So your parents can't be heroes to the kids because they don't have a cape and they're not Marvel, right? So your grandparents can't be a hero. There's GoPro heroes, dilutes the word hero, so children don't think of the word hero as a family member, for instance, as their grandparents or their aunts or their uncles or their brothers or sisters or their loved ones. Their heroes are all fictional. And that's a very slippery road. So the radioactive fallout is infinitely worse than that. And I just want to touch on that because that models you're looking at, we actually have good models now. Now we really know how radioactive fallout works. If Danny can get his act together. I went the wrong way. I'm sorry. Bear with me. Don't give up on me, baby. Okay, so let's show the French model, 16 days of Fukushima radioactive fallout, and we'll come back to this model. So this is a nuclear meltdown, which is different because a bomb goes off in a millionth of a second. These things might burn for 1 million years. So this model is based upon 16 days after the tsunami, which means it's 9 days of radioactive fallout after the last reactor detonated. There was 4 reactors melted down and 8 fuel pools. Each of the reactors, not counting the fuel pools, are worse than all nuclear meltdowns combined that we're aware of worldwide. So just a single Fukushima reactor building. And the first one they covered up, of course, was Reactor 4 in 2013. So like when you look at Reactor 4, the official story is that didn't happen. Even though this is the official picture, the official story is that didn't happen. And that the fuel pools are at the top of the buildings. They're still at the top of the buildings, but they got all the fuel out of the pools. I showed you that evidence earlier, right? But they didn't. But here, so in order for that law to work, all the media, and I mean all the media, everything, all the universities, I mean every one of them, have to regurgitate the law for that law to work. Otherwise, people like me or you will clip it together and saying, they're saying the fuel's not gone, they're saying it is gone, and that can be a very powerful thing. Not on YouTube because you're censored, but on Twitter or TikTok or something like that. So it was glorified, it was considered magic, and just people used to go down to Las Vegas and rent hotel rooms. There was a special package. Come on down. We got a couple of nuclear weapons going off the weekend. You might get some in a dish and bring it home with you to show the kiddies. The whole story is absurd. So this is another total fallout in the United States, 1951 to 1970 microsieverts per square meter. Per square meter. So if you got 12 to 64, which is the low number, that's a nasty number because 11 atoms decaying every second, which is considered a Becquerel, cause permanent heart damage to children. So imagine what it does to insects and birds and mammals and animals. So Senator Josh, I'm just afraid of butchering his last name now because I didn't do my due diligence, which is really unusual for me, really. Well, that happens. Sue me. I was watching a video, okay? Give me a break. The Radiation Exposure Compensation Act, RECA, which is set to expire in a matter of months, and Senator Hawley filed a RECA amendment to the Senate supplemental. So my goodness, man, if they you'll never get that bill back again if you get rid of it. The bill shouldn't have an expiry date. The radioactive fallout doesn't. In the early mornings when nobody was watching, the Senate voted to plow another $60 billion of your money into Ukraine, and not a penny for Missouri, not a penny for radiation victims. And the big war machine gets its billions, and what a betrayal. And so he came up, and I think we talked about this before anyway, right? But he came out and said it rather, a solution. There's an actual solution. And you're going to love this. This is a very short video. I'll be right back.
Maybe one way to help clear the eyes and focus the mind on this body is maybe we ought to pass a law that says that no member of Congress can hold stock or trade stock in corporations that have contracts with the defense industry. Wouldn't it change things around here if no member of Congress could turn a profit on the machinery of war? My goodness, what a difference that would make. My goodness, how the debates in this chamber would change. My goodness, might it be, heaven forbid, that members might ask themselves, what should we do for the workers of this country as opposed to the defense contractors who are making hand over fist money in Ukraine? I keep hearing all this talk about how this bill is really all about renewing our industrial base. What that really means is it's about sending more money to defense contractors. They've already gotten paid once this year. Now they're going to get paid again. And I'm sure again and again and again. But mark my words, in just a few weeks' time, we'll be hearing about how we have no funds for anybody who's a victim of nuclear radiation, no funds to do anything for East Palestine, no funds.
And he makes all kinds of great points. But how about if the politician couldn't have stocks in the military-industrial complex's machine? What do you think Pelosi gets all of her money that she has right now, right? All these, this is how it was done. This is how they get their kickback. John McCain, remember a video of John McCain? He was in Senate, and he was playing poker, and he was betting $5,000 a bet, real money. And he kept winning. He won so much. He was making so much racket that people turned the camera and started zooming down. This is what he was doing. This was his kickback. He was playing the game, and instead of you get 10 points, you get $5,000. So he made like $500,000 in 2 hours. And he couldn't contain his giddiness. And he got exposed by doing it. But he was a war hawk, right? It was just terrible what he'd done to humanity. But we'd like to thank the senator for having the courage and the fortitude to speak honestly, to be sincere and genuine. It's extraordinary. And you got to realize, we scan the news all day and we look for lies, right? We know we're not going to find the truth, but this was the rare occasion we actually found somebody that was honest. We're still in a bit of a shock, actually. Fukushima nuclear plant operators told to communicate better with the public. So recently there was 5,500 tons or something. Was it 5 tons or whatever it was? 5 tons, I'm sorry. That they, when it left into the ocean from the ELP system. Now, there is no ELP system. There's no Ceres system, no RECA, no Current systems for water filtration. The water's being poured over a reactor core. So it's picking up endless fuel particulates on top of it being irradiated, ionized. And any water you're pouring over 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures is atomized in aerosol and ionized and radiated anyway. So the theory is they want you to believe that the uranium cores are in the buildings when the building doesn't even exist. And let me show you another picture of reactor 3 and 4. See, they're not pouring water in these reactors. You see anywhere they're pouring water on the reactors? The buildings don't exist. They should have been scrapped right to the ground. There's nothing left there. These were 190 feet, 19-story, 65-meter buildings tall, and they were 50 meters wide, 150 feet wide. These are skyscrapers. And so the story is nothing got out as of July the 13th, 2023. The United Nations, the International Atomic Energy Agency, ERPA, UNSCLEAR, the IPRC, the IPCC, all of them now switched their story. This never happened. Nothing got out. Everything's in the tanks, and there's only 2.2 grams of tritium. The tanks were built so you wouldn't look at that and say, see, when they say the tanks are going to be full, they don't show you these pictures. Say, from these buildings, because you'll say, well, wait, now the buildings are gone. They're all gone on the 6th day. By the way, we counted the tanks, and the majority of them are small tanks. They tell you large, right, in order to come up with the tonnage. It's actually only 750. And anything from the Associated Press is going to be Mary Yamaguchi. And we can trace, and we do, we trace her all the way back to 2013 when it comes to the tanks. In 2013, she said all the tanks, there was 1,000 tanks built on site. 2014, the same thing. 2017, 2019, 2021, 2023, 2024, she's telling the same story for Associated Press. Fukushima nuclear plant operator told to communicate better with the public after the leak. You see a leak right there? Anybody see a leak? I don't see no leak there, Dana. You're just fear-mongering. That's right. So why is the word leak so important, I wonder? Why did they show you the building and then use all these words? Leak. Leak! Look, Dana, look at all the leaks. Oh my God, it's leaking. Oh my goodness, you better do something. Look at the leaks. I can't see a leak in them buildings for some reason. Remember, at the top of each of the buildings was around 10 reactor cores that are still splitting atoms. Well, they were. They were atomized in aerosol and released into the environment. Here's NOAA's, the American government's model based on 40 days of radioactive fallout from the leaks. And by the way, they're only talking about cesium-137. I'm worried about plutonium, neptunium, strontium, and the iodines, and the cesium. But I'm worried about americium too. I'm worried about technetium. I'm worried about 1,000 fission products. So this model is based on 40 days, when it stops, of radioactive fallout, but it's only based on venting. The model is, that's the American model. It's only based on cesium-137. It's not based on the real isotopes. And the biggest byproduct of the radioactive isotopes is the curium isotopes. And you need lead shielding 20 times thicker for the curium isotope you do for the plutonium. So if they'd done the model was based on the actual loss of the inventories, which is the reactor cores and the fuel pools. They said reactor 4 core wasn't running, but it still had 3/4 of the reactor core in the core. They're not going to change all the fuel to one time. So 3/4 was still in the fuel, was in the reactor core itself. And there was 8 to 10 reactor cores in the fuel pools, the 2 fuel pools at the top of the buildings of each of them. Like, the numbers we're talking about is maybe 40 reactor cores melted down at the one time. And this is why you've seen so many of these condensation show up right away. But then the media, brutal. Every media does the exact same thing. Leak. Fukushima nuclear plant operator told to communicate better with the public. Because, well, communicating better would be to show the public that, wouldn't it? Show the public that. And then say the word leak. Fukushima nuclear, this is ABC News, Australia. Leaked. Do you see a pattern, or is that just me? Is there a pattern right there? Leak. This is called severe, brutal brainwashing. The leak, and it came out from the leak. And there could be a little leak over in by the leak. And yeah, it's leaking some, but it's just a leak. So, leak. Have a great day. Chicken neck. Japan seeks to allay Pacific Islands' fears over Fukushima discharges. Yeah. You know, Fukushima children, this is 2012, by the way. In 2012, there was also 865,000 extra cancers. Not everybody got health care. Not everybody's diagnosed, and cancers ain't the only illness or disease. So there was 35.8% of Fukushima children with thyroid tumors. These are tumors, they're 2 centimeters. And the reason I call them a tumor is because your thyroid gland is only 3 by 5 centimeters. So a 2 centimeter lump on a 3 by 5 centimeter, that's a tumor. If you had a 1 foot tumor on your body, you call that a tumor, right? You wouldn't call that a lump. You wouldn't call that a cyst. So, which means your thyroid now is producing radioactive hormones because you have so much radiation. How do you think that's going to work out for birds and mammals and animals and insects and kids and the elderly, the vulnerable of society? Like, we're all built the exact same way. Except for me, I got gills, obviously, right? I used to be a commercial diver. That's a bit of a joke for everybody. So 13,646 do out of 38,000, which is 35.8%. Bear with me. So that's 358,000 out of a million children. If you've done the test, right, you would expect to find tumors, large tumors on the thyroid glands of 2 centimeters, which is a large tumor. So how many thyroid cancers, tumors, etc. was there pre-Fukushima?
まさに今そこに元気な人が死んでくんだよね。
But there's clear evidence rates have risen. Before the disaster in 2011, the rate of thyroid cancer was between 1 and 2 cases in every million children.
So 1 to 2 cases per million, and now it's 358,000 out of a million. That's a bit of a problem, isn't it? And then at the same, that's 2012. In the same year, there was also 865,000 cancers in 2012. There was 358,000 out of a million children with thyroid tumors, large ones, because the thyroid gland is so small. And 865,000 cancers. There's also 6 out of 10 children had diabetes in Fukushima Prefecture. And every kid in Kanto, which is a region of Tokyo, tested for cesium in their urine was unbelievably radioactive. And they stopped putting out the numbers after 2012. Not everybody got health care, not everybody was diagnosed. And they should be doing studies on heart problems and liver problems and lung problems and respiratory and pituitary and thyroid and adrenaline and Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, schizophrenia. See, they say, oh, you're just phobia. You're just fear-mongering. You're mental in the head, right? But there is all kinds of mental illnesses, is what he say that. See, there's always a grain of truth in the lie. And so the first studies they're going to do after a nuclear accident is Down syndrome and autism, because they know they're going to find it all over the place. And where the ratio stays normal, that's where the radioactive fallout is basically considered stop. And this is why they've done studies on Europe after Chernobyl, for instance, and checked for sex ratio studies, because they know there's going to be more males than females. But remember, they closed after Chernobyl 9,400 farms in Ireland, Scotland, and United Kingdom. And 400 are still closed today, just shy of 400, because of radioactive fallout. Which means you should have abandoned Ireland, Scotland, and United Kingdom, obviously, and Europe, because they had to cross Europe to get to Ireland, Scotland, United Kingdom. If you look up the maps, and if you got that kind of a number happening there, then it's going to be still. It's going to circle the whole planet. Just you can't stop this stuff, right? Well, actually, it's like a snowstorm, right? The way it attacks your planet, it's like a snowstorm. 6 in 10 Fukushima children. That was 2012. So in 2012, you got 6 in 10 Fukushima children with diabetes. You got 865,000 extra cancers. You got 358,000 out of a million children with thyroid tumors of 2 centimeters or larger, and the thyroid is only 3 by 5 centimeters. when there used to be only 1 to 2 per million. And it doesn't stop there. I got a huge list of this stuff. Everybody's like, no, nothing got out, Dana. The United Nations said so. Oh, you mean the military-industrial complex, according to George Bush. And the military-industrial New World Order, according to George Bush. And I played that clip earlier. But Dwight Eisenhower called him the military-industrial complex when he's in his final speech, right? Japan seeks to allay Pacific Islanders' fear over Fukushima discharge. Treated. You're being treated like an idiot is what it is. Safety panel urges Fukushima nuclear power plant operators to tell the truth. Just kidding you. So, what are they talking about? They're claiming nothing got out, and so they got to be better communication. Well, look at the buildings. You tell me what got out. By the way, this is only 2 of the 4 buildings. There's Reactor 3, Reactor 4. There's 4 buildings and 8 fuel pools melted down. It's equal to all the reactors, twice as many reactors as Canada has melting down at the one time. This is mind-boggling. It's equal to half the American reactors melting down at one time. Pacific leaders raised Fukushima wastewater release with the Japanese minister. Pacific leaders who, how can they not know the reactors look like this? How is it nobody on the planet is showing you this picture? And when did I put this picture together? That was 2013 or something, right? Well, actually, I can't remember. I got a date on the picture, but I got to go back into my... because I'm using a TriCaster, it's not easy for me to go back and find that picture right now because I've been at this for over a decade. And I can't remember how many terabytes I got of this stuff, but like 10 terabytes of information on this. It's absurd. So remember when she got appointed there, well, it wasn't very long ago, was it 6 weeks ago or something? I came out and bashed her because I told you she'd be a pig. For the first time in 7 years, the Japanese foreign minister has paid an official visit to Fiji. Well, Fiji is a nuclear wasteland. Fiji is sitting right in the middle of a nuclear wasteland. This is Fukushima potential release of cesium-137. That's Japan. I'm going to speed this up because... so that's the plume coming in over here, over there. This is Norwegian Institute for Air Research. And now you see it, and the date at the top is the 26th of March. It's the first month. So this only goes to 28th of March. So that's just one of the many. Now that's cesium-137, but there's another one with a cesium-137, which is the French's model, and it's 1 million to 10 million atoms per cubic meter of air. And this model is based on 16 days after the tsunami, 9 days after the last reactor blew up. So it's an incomplete model, and it's only based on a partial meltdown. So after 16 days, anything that's yellow is radioactive for the next 1 million years. And there's another study to your left out of California, tends to concentrate in your testicles. 360 plus atoms of radioactive sulfur per day may have been inhaled by Californians. So look at bioaccumulation, day after day after day after day, because that ain't going away. And that ain't the only atoms. So you got sulfur peroxide, hydrogen buckyballs. It was created by spraying salt water on the melter reactors at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. Now, they knew about this during the ocean nuclear wars. You call it nuclear testing. These were nuclear wars because the same nuclear weapon, the same emissions, right? That's a nuclear war. You know, like Castle Bravo was 1,000 Nagasaki bombs because that was a plutonium bomb. So Castle Bravo was equal to 1,000 Nagasaki bombs going off at the same time. Is that not a nuclear war? You're pretty naive if you don't think that's a nuclear war. You're gullible as they get. Now, this was just a single site. Look at the plume covering the whole planet. there's 1,000 fuel pools worldwide doing the same plumes. Not as intense, obviously, but doing the same plumes, covering the entire planet in just 9-10 days. Every day, them plumes are coming out. It never stops. It's like an invisible snowstorm that after 30 days, the first 30 days, the whole planet is an invisible snowstorm. If you had special glasses, it would look like it's snowing. And each atom is pulsing energy every second, almost at the speed of light in every direction, like an explosion. And so gammas and alphas and neutrons and betas and X-rays. And so when they hit each other, they don't mingle, right? They don't intertwine with each other. They hit each other almost at the speed of light, then they change direction. Gammas and alphas, bang, almost at the speed of light. And the shock wave creates what's known as an X-ray. An invisible snowstorm of X-rays. So everything in a forest, for instance, is getting full-body X-rays. So it kills the bacteria and the fungus and the biota. It breaks down the forest. And so the litter and the foliage doesn't break down anymore. And after a few years, start getting lightning strikes. And all this foliage that normally in litter that didn't exist because the biota would break it down has been exterminated because you can't have that breaking down without the basis of it, which is fungus and bacteria. Because the root systems can't suck up water. The whole system works on fungus and bacteria. So now you have all these flash floods. That's what you would expect to see when that happens. And we noticed from Chernobyl. Because the water no longer gets soaked up into the earth. So when you get a bunch of rain anywhere, it can run all the way to the coastline at high speeds. And it does. And because we're seeing this symmetrically right around the world, it means the whole world ecosystem was permanently impaired. And you can see the catalysts of it. This was a plume event. So we've had all kinds of nasty for 80 years from the nuclear industry. And there's no incentive not to be evil. And they built these reactors in a fault on an earthquake zone where there's 1,000 earthquakes a year and many, many big ones. Not only that, there's a 3,000-year legacy of tsunamis up to 300 feet high. You go along the coast in Japan, any communities, as you go up the mountains, you'll see signs left over from 1,000 years ago saying, don't build houses below here, carved into the mountainsides. Because of the legacy, they knew it. And everybody knows there's the Ring of Fire, including Japan. And so why would you build because the wind, we know, blows straight across to North America. Why build all these American reactors with American engineers on a fault line they know is going to eventually take down a bunch of these reactors? Why put all the fuel at the top of the reactor buildings? You really think that's an accident? Right? Because it's not an accident. You could have easily built an extending building with underwater capacities and transferred the fuel directly out of the building to another building and been able to separate it and keep it underwater. So that if you did have a meltdown, it wouldn't take out the fuel pools, which are 4 decades of reactor cores. Chernobyl was a tiny reactor. It was a brand new reactor. It was a graphite reactor. These reactors in Japan, not counting the fuel pools, but if you just count the reactors, they're 100 Chernobyl because they're pure uranium, pure plutonium. So you got 400 Chernobyls there, but now you got around 4,000 Chernobyls at least, 4,400 by my numbers. But hang on a second. The common spent fuel pool was right behind reactor 4 at the same ground level. It was like 150 feet away on the exact same piece of pavement, the same level. So the ocean ran through there, and because we provide those pictures endlessly, I'm not going to do it tonight. But it's time to make a stand because you got no choice. So for the first time in 7 years, the foreign minister went there to tell them that never happened. That's what she's doing there. She's like, everything's okay. It's all in the tanks. There's nothing got out. Look at the buildings. So she didn't show you that picture. She's not there. She's like, well, turn the projector on, show them the picture. Now look at it. Nothing got out, so shut up. She's not doing that. She's not doing that. In the fight against climate change. Climate. Let me explain that for you. Just this. I got a nice little video there that tells that story. What percentage of the atmosphere is CO2? This is a real short video.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Panelists, Let me just go right down the line real fast. What percent of our atmosphere is CO2? Take your best guess. You don't have to be accurate. All down the line.
Repeat that question.
What percent of our atmosphere is CO2, carbon dioxide? Wild guess, it's okay.
I'll buy 5%.
5?
I'll just follow you then.
We'll go 7. That's my favorite number.
I'll see their 5 and suggest that we know that transportation causes 49% of CO2, so that's why we're all working on energy transition.
All right. So what number do you think it is?
5.
5? How about you? I didn't hear you, Mr. Dreher.
7.
7. Did you have one, Mr. Boyd?
So we got a 5, 7,
This Price is Right.
8. I'm going to get the high end.
All right. Well, I appreciate that, and I don't mean to put you on ice. I ask a lot of people that because all we hear is climate change, CO2, CO2. I heard a couple of you on the panel saying you're looking to change your vehicles to electric, even though we don't have the electric grid. And me as a farmer, I wouldn't be real happy about running out and replacing $300,000, $500,000, $1 million pieces of equipment because someone wants it to be electric. The answer is 0.04%. Not 1%, not a half of a percent. It's 0.04%, and it's gone up from 0.03 over the last couple decades. This is what we're being all contorted into doing, is this tiny change in CO2. If we get below 0.02, plant life starts dying off.
So 0.04% is 410 parts per million. So if I got $1 million in $1 bills, I take out 410 $1 bills. Would you notice it? If you were stood there and you turned around and took $410 out of a $1 million stack of $1 bills, are you going to notice it? No. So what is causing the global warming? Global warming is caused by 80 years of emissions. These plumes cover the entire planet right away, and it never stops for 80 years. And so you have an invisible snowstorm pulsing energy every second. And then it destroys the ecosystem and sterilizes all the species in increments. You know, how come you're not cleaning your windshield of insects in the summer anymore, post-Fukushima? We've done studies. We've done 6 years of research expeditions on the Pacific Ocean alone. 4 to 5 months a year doing species counts is an extinction event. Go into my playlist shorts, where there's 1-minute videos, or go into my playlist and there's a quiz, a Fukushima anniversary quiz with 5 short videos. And each one of them are 2 or 3 minutes on important facets of Fukushima. And you're up to speed. There's no one going to beat you in a debate if you watch those 5 videos. If all you ever do is watch this video and those 5 little 2 and 3 minute videos, there's nobody out there can beat you in a debate on Fukushima. There's literally nobody can beat you because you've become articulated. And I provide the documentation for every one of my assertions because I'm stupid sucker for punishment. And the world just sits there in complete silence. I gave the world every opportunity it could ever dream of. Nobody's ever come out and challenged the nuclear industry. Nuclear industry is just one big stupid bully. And they bully me, or try to bully me constantly for 22 years. I'm so scared of the nuclear industry. You're a bunch of cowards. If they're walking down the road and the car backfires, every one of them will excrete right into their pants, right on the spot. And if there's a real threat, they'll stick their hands down there and they'll take it out and they'll wipe it all over themselves to make themselves repulsive to any kind of threat to them, because they're chicken necks, right? They're the very definition. The U.S. has started purchasing Japanese seafood. What are you doing, man? Why would you do that? They already contaminated all your water and your food. Why would you take the food from the nuclear wasteland itself? Because China, U.S., so it works this way. South Korea, Taiwan, China, and Japan, and the U.S. are working closely together. And I showed you the media from America, United Kingdom, Australia, pretending they're in a building that doesn't exist. That's just a fraction of the media that done that, right? That clip was 10 years ago or something. And I remember making the clip and saying, "Whoa, this is great. I'm going to just put this clip out by itself and it's going to percolate out there, and that's the end of the nuclear industry, because how can you survive a lie like that, see?" Done nothing. It's the most powerful video imaginable, and I play it almost every single day, or show it, right, every day. Every Greenpeace on the planet has blocked me because I tweeted that picture at them, right? The U.S. has started purchasing Japanese seafood to support the struggling industry. And G7, which the new president of G7 now is going to be the Italian prime minister, the youngest prime minister, and she's a female, 45 years old. And she looks Japanese, right? As the G7 calls for import restrictions to be repealed. So G7 is asserting that never happened. They're saying that never happened. They're saying the buildings didn't melt down. That's what the G7 is doing. So you got every media, every university, all the key government agencies in the nuclear industry worldwide saying that Fukushima didn't happen. Why? Like, really, why would you suggest that never happened? Because the radioactive fallout is real. Global warming is radioactive fallout. It's invisible. This is only 19.5 days, 468 hours later. You know, the study at a Canada with 220 million atoms per liter of iodine-129. The nuclear industry, well, it doesn't pulse very far, Dana. Yeah, but it pulses at the speed of light. It saturates your thyroid glands, which ends up saturating your pituitary gland, which is unbelievably important for regulating your brain. So what do you think this is doing to the insects? You're talking about everybody is producing radioactive hormones forever because that never goes away. That's got a 15 million year half-life. So after Fukushima, this was 2016, by the way, it came out. I was on the ocean for many years at this point with these 3 boats, and I was doing research expeditions.
Well, we got the big one up.
And so I went all the way from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska for 4 to 5 months a year, some years up to 6 months. And this is an extinction event. The species are gone. These are before and after pictures. Now, I used to be a commercial diver, so I have extra insight. This was my backyard for a long time, for over 10,000 hours. And I used to anchor in these exact spots. And so I went back to these spots, and it's naked, post-Fukushima. And so what I done was I went back year after year because I wanted to see if the species recovered, because I'm an idiot. And the nuclear industry has never stopped attacking me. And when I'm on the ocean, I can't defend myself because I'm out there by myself. And here I am trying to work 2 drones, the underwater drone and the flying drone. And because as soon as you bend over, you're going to hit one of those little controllers. I was getting good at it, but the species are wiped out. So even in the worst harbor, the worst bays, the worst estuaries, the worst fjords, and British Columbia has 27,000 islands, these giant plume sea anemones, which come in multiple vibrant colors, and there's around 78 species of them, by the way. But these giant ones grow 2 to 3 to 4 feet at, when they're full of water, they expand. But when they deflate, they're very visible. And the white ones, when I was coming into shallow areas, at nighttime in particular, I got one of the floodlights pointed down at the ocean floor, I can spot the rocks that are not on the charts because the GPS doesn't chart absolutely every rock. And if you remember my research expeditions, that's why I have a Coast Guard Zodiac with a Kevlar coating on the bottom that's bulletproof, because I've hit some of those rocks in pretty good swells at very high speeds that weren't on the GPSs, right? Because I'm up there, I'm meandering through 27,000 islands by myself for 4 to 5 to 6 months a year. And then I put all this documentation up at my website, thenuclearproctologist.org, with the GPSs, so anybody can go back and repeat it. But these are authentic before and after pictures. This is something I vividly remember going in pre-Fukushima and putting up the beach lines. So we'd have to walk through the beaches. How do you walk through this without stepping on animals? So we used to really, you would wait till high tide and go in with the small Zodiacs, and then you can get right to the trees because everything is tropical rainforest with 27,000 islands. And it would take you 71 years to visit 27,000 islands if you visit an island every day. And in my lifetime, I visited the majority of them, or seen them, because that was my research ground, right? And I used to move the fleet 30 kilometers at a time. See, this is a normal site. No matter where I go in British Columbia or Alaska coastlines, this is a normal site. Same thing with California. If you go there now, it's gone. And the reason it's gone is because the radioactive plume showed up in 19.5 days. And so a lot of the heavy radiation washes back down to the coastline. The tidal zones are exposed multiple times a day. That's why they're pretending they're in a building that don't exist. And so, the migratory birds would come along the coastline, and now they're getting irradiated, so they're susceptible to flus and viruses and pathogens and everything else because they don't have any nutrition in the tidal zones. The tidal zones are empty. So normally, there was, say, 700 algae, and in the 700 algae, there was 5,500 well-known invertebrates without the backbones. They're like little shrimps. That wasn't the only species that was in the 700 algae. But then there was all these clams and snails and mollusks. There was the little necks and manillas. There was the scallops, the abalones, the oysters, the razorback clams, which is what the beaches were made of. Because if you go to at low tide, it's so difficult to walk from the low tide to the high tide to put up a beach line or to go for a hike because you got to walk across all these animals. And it's easy to slip and hurt yourself. And if you don't slip once a week trying to do it, if you're one of those people that's doing it, I know everybody that, not everybody, but I know a lot of people that used to do it, and they eventually gave up on it. Not only that, you got to worry about these creatures. Well, you don't have to worry about them no more. They're gone. It's exterminated. This is an extinction event. And nobody can say it's not because I went there for 6 years. And that's why I'm like I am today, is because I can't switch that off. I can't escape what I've seen, right? It haunts me every fucking day. Excuse the language. It haunts me. So South Korea's Japanese seafood imports plummeted amid Fukushima water release controversy. So what South Korea didn't even ban the food till 2013. So they poisoned everybody in South Korea, not just from radioactive fallout, because they closed 130 schools, right, after Fukushima because of radioactive fallout. But the current administration is pro-nuclear. South Korea Japanese seafood imports plummeted. So South Korea, Taiwan, China, and Japan is running this story to promote tritium and the fable that nothing got out of the reactors to the Asian community. And they're hoping it will ignite protests, and it did. We've seen 84% of the population in South Korea protesting one way or another against Japan releasing the so-called tritium. This is the cover story, to cover up. They don't show this picture and said they're going to release tritium. They just said there's no pictures. Or if they do give a picture, it's an airplane helicopter shot far away of the nuclear site. And everybody uses those pictures, right? It's a 100% scam meant to manipulate the consensus in the Asian community. And this is catastrophic because radiation is really good at sterilizing you. If you look at the studies, if you go back and find, I got one show I done on Chernobyl. It wasn't last year or the year before maybe, but it's on my site. They took down my site a couple of years ago when I was out on a research expedition 400 miles into the woods looking for spiders because they were missing. Because normally you check a spider web, right, for what insects are in the territory, and we can't find spiders. And I started focusing in on spiders and ants because I was finding these ants nest everywhere. And then there's a lot of people in certain sections where they had cabins. And so I would always stop and ask them how the bees were, how the wasps were, how the ants were. And all of them were telling me the same thing. They disappeared. And they disappear because there's no bacteria, no fungus in the forest there. Hawaii says no nuclear power here. The state can't even do the basics. Or they'll just burn you out of there like they've done at Lahaina. Federal money could supercharge state effort to preserve nuclear power. This is Holtec, Chris Singh. Chris Singh is a Pakistani or an Indian, I can't remember. No, he's an Indian. And so he's unbelievably unscrupulous. And so he'll bid on a decommissioning project. It normally takes 60 years and costs us several $billions. And that money is allocated to the bidders. And then if the bidders come in underneath the bid, then they make a profit. When it should be the other way, they should have to decommission it and get paid to do it, like they do for certain work. Like at Hanford, they get a $25 million bonus here and $10 million bonuses there. Instead, what they've done with Chris Singh, because he's a degenerate, is he takes over the plant. There's, say, $1.5 billion to decommission it. He does it in a couple of years, which means incredible radioactive waste into your landfills and everywhere else. He lobbies government to change the legalese of certain radioactive materials so he can throw it in the local landfills. Like real life evil, and encouraged and promoted by the Department of Energy to do exactly that. It's an industry of scumbags. That's the nuclear industry. I don't know how you can describe it. An industry of degenerates. A plant in Michigan might become the first to reopen after closing. It's one of the very few nuclear power plants not surrounded by farms, but a key source of water, right? Lake Michigan. So Lake Michigan is incredibly contaminated from these disease factories who can't contain the radiation, right? Microreactors. Fuel fabrication begins for Marvel, like, Marvel Comics, Spider-Man and the Hulk and Superman and all these stupid fake heroes that your kids will kill you if you call them that. Scheduled to be online in 2027. Oh, like NewScale. Really, they're going to build that and be online. What do you mean online in 2027? So they're going to be using mixed oxide fuel, like a halo fuel, very high grade SA, military industrial complex grade, 15% fuel. Reprocessed uranium, plutonium fuel rods. Like the worst of the worst that you can release into the environment. So like normal radioactive emissions from a nuclear plant is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. But the halo fuel toxic emissions atoms are 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. And they're that forever, long past the human experience. Which Idaho National Laboratory plans to host as its transient reactor test facility is now being fabricated by Triga. They got all kinds of names. These are all insiders, right? They were awarded a contract value at 8.4 million American dollars, 7.8 million sterlings in November to produce 37 fuel elements for Marvel, which is $227,000 for each fuel rod assembly. Is this assembly? Yeah, fuel element, which is the assembly. So $227,000 per assembly. It's got more energy, though. It's got the same amount of energy as $227,000 worth of coal. First ever joint recruitment campaign for nuclear sector in the United Kingdom. Nobody wants nothing to do with them. And what they're going to do is they're not looking for people for the industry for some renaissance, because there is no nuclear renaissance. I'll show you that in a second. They're looking for people to work at Sellafield, at Donneray, at all their disease factories. That's what they're actually looking for. With a basic education. And what was I going to show you? Now I forget. Oh, yeah. Renewables. Let me show you why there's not a nuclear renaissance. I set myself up for this each time. I should fix that. I'm going to fix it right now, so hang on. so I can find it first try every time. I swear to hell it was right there. Oh yeah, it is right there. I'm getting stupid now as I get older. So last year, worldwide nuclear, this came out this year, January 21st, less than a month ago, was last year nuclear power lost 1.7 gigawatts worldwide, which is like 2 large nuclear power plants, whereas renewables in 2023, in a single 12-month period, was an additional 507 gigawatts. Like, this is absurdness. Which is 50% more than last year. It was 360 gigawatts, I thought, last year, wasn't it? In fact, I'm sure it is. But what they expect between 2020 and 2024, or 26, was 4,800 gigawatts of new renewables added to the grid worldwide, which is equal to all the power on the planet combined. All gas, oil, and coal, rather, on the planet combined. But they're not even concentrating on it. And right, the staged war in Russia and Ukraine and the artificial inflation caused by United Nations countries and adopting, without a referendum, embargoes against commodities from a country that was the only country that can supply it in those quantities and for those prices, they blocked that and automatically caused artificial inflation in all the other commodities like steel and iron and aluminum and everything else, which drove up the price of renewables, yet it still punched the shit out of the despicable scumbag nuclear. Nuclear is doing it on purpose. Let's come back to that for a second. First ever joint recruitment campaign for nuclear scumbag sectors. They show you these people, man. The civil and defense nuclear workforce needs to double over the next 20 years, supporting about 80,000 additional skilled jobs across the United Kingdom. This is just, it's not going to happen. There is no nuclear renaissance. Like their original price in Sizewell was $7 billion in 2007. That's what it was pitched at. Oh yeah, piece of cake. Now it's 58 billion USD. And it's far from over, far from finished. There's zero possibility that's not going to hit $70 or $75 billion. It's zero possibility. That's not a nuclear renaissance. Even then, if you do manage to build it, it took them 42 years to get Watts Bar up and running, but they've done it. This is what I'm trying to say, right? The industry is insane. It wields so much influence and control because it has no, doesn't have anybody out there to educate the population. And so I'm doing my little humble bit here. And anybody that wanders accidentally finds me that's looking for the facts in the industry or in for a shock. They're going to sell their stocks in the morning. With our world-leading small modular reactor competition, there is no world-leading small modular reactor competition. What are you talking about? NuScale was the only one with an application into the regulatory agency. So if you haven't got an application into the regular agency, because it could take 5 years for hundreds of regulatory agencies to go through 1 million pieces of paper and re-engineer your fuck-ups and get it back to you 5 years later, then you got to re-engineer that back into it, submit it to the non-regulatory agency again, who now is going to eventually, after 10, 12, 14 years back and forth, now you have a design that might work, and so now you got to raise the money to build the site and build. NuScale took 18 years to scam everybody, very methodical, like everybody else involved in that industry. And so with NuScale reactors, they were going to build 6 reactors, and they were going to cost almost $20 billion for these small modular reactors. And they're only going to put out around 460 megawatts, less than half a gigawatt, for goodness sakes, for 3 times the price of a reactor built in a country that's not looting from the administration side. And while refurbishing the Pickering, Ontario plant is the right move for Ontario, of course, opinion, and these are both pro-nuclear scum. Like, these are It's like putting Rod Adams and Michael Schellenberg together. They're two scumbags. And one of them's an actual doctor, which is frightening. How many people is he murdering with radiation every year, I wonder? Because radiation doesn't cure, we know that. And all the hospitals are out there happy to murder. Yeah, okay, yeah, you're going up on that floor. Oh, Jesus. That means I'm not coming back, right? Yeah, well, you're getting radiation treatment. At least 3% of the people survive. That's pretty good odds. Like, it's better off not touching it, according to the studies. We need more wishful thinking to keep the lights on, our homes comfortable, and our hospitals running. These are worthless humans, the people that wrote this story, by the way. Chris Kiefer and Chris Adams. These are real-life scumbags. First off, the Pickering nuclear power plant is full of fuel. The fuel pools are there hemorrhaging. And Pickering is a metropolitan area. And the releases from Pickering, legal releases that are put out into the ocean, are right alongside the intakes for drinking water for 3 million people in Toronto. And that the Pickering tritium releases have already contaminated the Great Lakes. But the fuel pools have no containment, they're hemorrhaging up those skinny stacks. And there's no way the doctors don't know that's happening. A healthy civil society demands robust, evidence-based debate on major government initiatives. But they don't have a debate. They come up with propaganda. Every paragraph is propaganda. It's frightening that people like that actually exist. Like, they're doing it because it's evil. They're not doing it because they think they have the moral high ground. They're doing it because they know it's evil. Like, we've covered them now since their inception of that company. Canadian for Nuclear Energy. He's the president, Chris Kiefer, and Chris Adams is the co-founder of Canadian for Nuclear Energy. We've covered both of them extensively over the years. These are notorious degenerates. These are relentless degenerates. Waste headed for Ontario site is a radioactive mishmash, nuclear industry veterans. We talked about this a lot, right? Chalk River National Laboratories, which is on the Ottawa River, which flows right down to the Atlantic Ocean, by the way. But it also evaporates from the Chalk River, or Ottawa River, and ends up in those communities and cities and estuaries and streams and rivers and lakes. Chalk River is the site of 2 nuclear meltdowns, and it's not run by Canadians. Stephen Harper sold it to the private corporations, and the 2 worst ones out there at that is Jacob and Floor. And so they have no incentive not to be evil. They can't go to jail. They're a corporation. They can't get a criminal record for poisoning everybody and everything. And they're going to build it at what they call a surface disposal with 1 million tons. And there's nobody going to be inspecting it. Everything is vented. You're talking about stuff from nuclear meltdowns is going down in that hole in the ground. This is literally the stupidest thing can happen to humanity, and they're in charge, and there's no oversight. There's no checks and balances, so there's no incentive not to be evil like anything else in the nuclear industry. 1 kilometer from the river provides drinking water to millions of people in that region on top of it. Anything pre-2000, does anybody guess what the hell they have on their hands? He's a retired waste inventory specialist and former long-time employee of the Atomic Energy Canada Limited. And so he's got a whole lot of bones to pick. He's had a lot of sleepless nights. He's got pains of conscience. That's why he's talking, right? He's talking. And dead man tells no tales. And so he's a bitter man if he's talking. They poison him. That's why he's talking. Are you ready for some more stupid? Here's some fusion. Fusion's not going to work because, like, the sun can expel the radiation in a burst millions of miles out into space. We can't do that on Earth. That's why fusion. The only reason fusion works is because it has that particular attribute where it can expel. That's what makes fusion work in the first place, is that volatile reaction. Trying to mimic it on Earth is idiotic, because all those excellent academics and physicists and theoretical scientists, if they were to put them to work on solving geothermal for 12 days, we would automatically now switch everything to geothermal, because they would have worked it out. Because it only takes 10 days to come up with a few solutions. You need to go deep enough to hit 1,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures anywhere, because you can do it in a lot of places easily. But everywhere on the planet, if you dig deep enough, you're going to hit 1,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. That's hotter than gas, hotter than coal, hotter than oil, hotter than nuclear. And anything that gas, oil, coal, and nuclear can do, geothermal can do better. It was given a bit of loving. They're going to locate $95 million this year, which is a massive amount, in the legacy of geothermal in America, for instance. And how much did they throw at the nuclear weapons? $1 trillion or something? It's humiliating. Nuclear reactor to power eventually human colony on the moon, one step closer to reality. But why are you putting it in a place where there's darkness showing up? Why not put it where the sun is always shining? Because you can just use solar panels, right? Why do you want to be hid away? Because they don't want you looking at them. NASA, who gave us this scumbag James Hansen, the degenerate James Hansen. NASA's going to install a nuclear reactor on the moon to support an eventual human colony and power lunar bases. How come you haven't been back since 1972? Anybody? Like, how come China doesn't have a colony up there? How come Russia doesn't have a colony up there? Of course, Russia would if they could. How come China's not up there? I can't wrap my mind around it. Or India or Pakistan. How come nobody's up there going, woo, look at me? One big step for PlayStation. Reactors would have to be under 6 metric tons and produced 40 kilowatts of power, enough to power 30 households back on Earth. And all that for a lousy sum of $5 million. Right, just to come up with the idea. NASA Artemis, is it? Remember when they first launched that spaceship towards the moon? And they were showing actual people in the spacecraft, and so I'm not paying attention to that stuff. So when I seen it, I thought they had astronauts on the way to the moon. I was like, wow, I got to pay attention to this, I guess. Turns out it was just dummies they had there, and there was no astronauts on board of it. So why send a spacecraft to the moon with no astronauts on board of it? You can put them up in space for over a year, get up there and hang around, allegedly. It's hard to believe this industry. Like NASA has zero credibility. They gave us James Hansen, so they got zero credibility. Nuclear-powered data center campus in Surrey, Virginia gets rezoning approval. It's still 10 to 15 years away, they say, from coming to fruition. But they don't have small modular reactors. Now, in that same time, they can build a geothermal animosity equivalent, like Google just done. Google just built a megawatt of geothermal, enough to power it was more than a megawatt, it was enough to power 2,700 houses, to power their data center. And it's going to come in 1/3 of the price of this stupid thing. So why are they signing memorandums of understanding for 10 or 15 years down the road for something that doesn't exist? Everybody going to have a nuclear reactor in their back garden? Everybody can go out and blow up a nuclear reactor in their back garden. And guess what's going to happen eventually in every community? Site will eventually house small nuclear reactors. See, this is your 10, 15 years away, so why are we talking about this today? You don't even have an application for the license, Green Energy Partner. And this is not likely. This is IP3. However, they are not likely to be up and running for 10 to 15 years. So why are we talking about that today? Because it's just, the nuclear industry writes the story, sends it to a journalist who puts their name on it, and then that's how they make their money, make a living. And they built up an audience with cat videos and stupid gadget videos, right? You know, they were sending satellites. When they first started sending satellites up into space, it didn't take them long before they turned them into nuclear. And they blew up a lot of nuclear in the upper atmosphere, and everybody has plutonium in them just from that experience alone. Everybody in the nuclear industry makes a living by destroying everything in themselves and their children, their loved ones, and the future of humanity. No checks and balances. There's no dissenting voices allowed. There's no dissenting voices allowed. I done a show last night. Let me show you a show last night, because this stuff amazes me, how desperate they are. I'm the only voice out there, really, that's doing an educational program. Have been for a very long time, right? They got no one else to pick on, so they got me fucking tortured. Literally got me tortured. And they revel in it, eh? They're very proud of themselves. Oh, we're so good people. We're so good scumbags. What do we got here? Okay. So when my show was over last night, I'm going to bring this up on the big screen, the big shut screen for everybody. When my show was over last night, hour and 49 show, I had 1 view, or 4 views rather. So I had 4 views. I had 33 likes, but I only had 4 views. So when my video starts to trickle out there, it has no views. So no, I'm not going to watch that, right? There's no views on it. I only had 80 viewers, really. Really. A show I've been doing for over a decade straight. 5 days a week typically, never early, never late. Once or twice a year, I have to reboot my operating system. So normally after 12 hours, my videos will get longer, right? So hour 49 minutes, 1 second. 14 hours, it was hour 49 minutes, 6 seconds, 5 seconds longer. We believe in putting software into my video. And it takes about 12 hours. After 12 hours, my video gets longer, and then the comment section shows up. Now, also in my videos, this is 14 hours later, now the comment section didn't show up. And another thing you notice with my videos, you'll never see my videos alongside the video. But if you go anybody else's videos, their videos are alongside of it. And so it was, I think it was 16 hours later before my video, the comment section showed up instead of the typical 12 hours. Listen, you know, I'm so busy doing what I do. I don't have time for games. I really don't. I gotta get up really early I gotta get up in a few hours and keep an eye on the weather, because when the blizzard starts, I gotta get out there and get ahead of it. I gotta be out there all day tomorrow. And so I got the bike is fueled up. I got the plow on the bike is fueled up. I got an extra gallon strapped to the back of the bike. I spent all day today out there getting the garden and equipment ready. We got a serious snowstorm coming, and I'm not healthy enough to shovel snow. I have a snow shovel, electric one. Those things are excellent. I can throw snow about 30 feet, soft snow, but I'm really good with the plow, with the quad and the plow. But you know, if you get a lot of snow, you got to get out there early to get ahead of it, because once it stacks up on you. And there's a few elderly people around here that I'm keeping an eye on to make sure that they can get in and out of their driveways that can't do it themselves. And so I have 4 elderly that I'm paying attention to. And then I'll go up and do their driveways too. Okay, so this is the framing for the Kevlar sarcophagus for reactor 1. So this piece here is that piece up right there. So there's 4 layers of that. But this gives you context. See, buddy, right there? This gives you context of how big these buildings are. So when you look at that building, it's hard to comprehend how big it is. So that section there, this piece here is taller than that section to your left. It's actually taller, that small piece is taller than reactor 1, reactor 3, and reactor 4 stumps stacked on top of each other. So that section there is only right here. Now the fuel pool is at the very top of the building, so is the reactor core. So when you see these people pretending that they're in a building that doesn't exist, that should terrify you. Now reactor 1, it blew up. That was a detonation of the fuel pools, like 8 to 10 reactor cores detonating. So they built this Kevlar sarcophagus and put it around it so you couldn't see it. They were only doing that to hide it from you, because you're cooking it. So the Kevlar sarcophagus now becomes a radioactive nightmare. And if you take like a square foot of this Kevlar sarcophagus and bring it to a subway and put it in a wall by the escalators or the steps, everybody walks past it, dies that day for 1 million years. That's how toxic that friggin' stuff actually is. Reactor 2 was 100% nuclear meltdown, and the fuel pools, along with number 1, were 100% meltdowns. 2 fuel pools. And the reason they have so much fuel in the pools is because they don't have a repository anywhere worldwide. This is reactor 3 blowing up. Watch it. You'll see the plume, but you'll also see big chunks start falling. Now this is slow motion. Big chunks falling back down. That's the fuel pools and the reactor cores falling back to Earth. The fuel pools have around 8 to 10 reactor cores you've just seen falling back down to Earth that didn't atomize an aerosol into the environment, which is a catastrophic amount. 600 helicopter pilots died at Chernobyl. Every one of them. So reactor 3, I just showed you that explosion. Reactor 4. Now the reason they didn't scuttle these all the way to the ground, and that's what they should have done with remote control cranes and everything, because reactor 1 and reactor 3 blew up, but we don't have footage of reactor 4, which is right alongside of reactor 3 blown up. How come? Because the footage we do have is from far away. It's 30 miles away, high quality security camera, and when you zoom in, but why didn't we get the reactor 4 blowing up? Because I can assure you reactor 4 blew up, even though officially they said it didn't blow up. And the reason that they didn't scuttle those 2 buildings all the way to the ground, because they wanted to manipulate you, and they manipulated you by building these contraptions off-site and then coming in with cranes and installing it. Reactor 3 doesn't exist. I'll show you the pictures. And reactor 4 doesn't exist. So they put them contraptions there, and then they claimed that they were inside the building getting the fuel out of the pools. There's 80 years of a journalist doing this to you. What do you think is going to eventually evolve from these people being able to get away with such an egregious lie? Unbelievable deceit. And that every academic, every nuclear scientist, every journalist on the planet investigator would have known the fuel pools and the reactor cores were gone in the very first footage that was released. And certainly in 2013, when they released this, they would have known that was gone. There wasn't a journalist or an academic in the university. There wasn't a professor. There wasn't a dean of a single university. Didn't know that that was fake and hid it from you with cruel intentions. Because they knew, and this is the French's government, this plume model is based on 1 million to 10 million atoms of just the cesium-137. Cesium-137 is not the only emission. And there was a lot of it. And so last year, in July the 13th, the first English version we've seen of the new cover story, they moved the goalpost on us again. That author, Young Jong-il, is a professor at the Department of Nuclear and Quantum Engineering. So imagine if I start off each of my show, hi, I'm Dana Durnford, and I'm a nuclear and quantum engineer. Get a lot of attention, right? Well, he says the 1,000 tanks is equal to 2.3 grams of tritium. In other words, nothing got out of the buildings. Nothing got into the environment. And that what did get into the environment, he said, was equal to 2 or 3 grams of sugar. So who are you going to believe? You're going to believe a professor at the Department of Nuclear and Quantum Engineering in South Korea? Or are you going to believe Dana, who's saying, hey, wait a second, something got out? He doesn't show you that picture and make the saying that is equal to 3 grams of sugar, does he? Sanctioned by the South Korean government, which current administration, Young, had claimed that Fukushima didn't melt down before he was elected when he was campaigning. Nothing got out, but they picked up 30 million one-ton bags. The food was banned in 14 prefectures by 55 countries for a decade. Like, this is not a game. This is not a game. This is real. And that's the show tonight. This is a plume model of plutonium-239 dispersal. The model is developed with TEPCO's total release evaluations. And that includes dispersion models plutonium-239-241. This is a 20-day radioactive fallout model of plutonium-239. And then all the studies, all the animals died of 3 tumors when they get plutonium in them, the liver, the lung, and the bones. So in one study, Dr. Raymond Gilmedy from Loveless Respiratory Research Institute in New Mexico, they had 144 beagle dogs and beagle puppies with a single inhalations, and we're talking about a very small amount, and they let them live out their life. And deaths occurring from tumors began about 1.5 years after, and all the dogs were dead within 5.5 years, and 80% of them died of bone tumors, but all of them had 3 tumors. They had bone tumors, liver tumors, and lung tumors, all 3 of the dogs, or 3 tumors for each animal. But the biggest byproduct of the radioactive fallout is not plutonium-239. It's the curium isotopes. In curium isotopes, you need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium-239. So this whole planet is being exterminated. So when you see numbers of plutonium-241 from Fukushima, it's 70,000 times more than the atomic bomb fallout in Japan, which was just a few kilograms. Fukushima had millions and millions of pounds per building. So it's like a completely different inventories. And that sounds like a lot, and it is, but it's nothing compared to the reality that each building had around 10 reactor cores in it. And each of those reactor cores were equal to at least 100 Chernobyls. Give or take 2 or 3. When you pick up 30 million one-ton bags, that's a statement, okay? That's an incredible statement. All right, so let's close the poll down. Thank you, everybody. Now we're going into a snowstorm tomorrow, right? So nuclear power plants, also known as disease factories, that are surrounded by farms worldwide, because almost every nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms, be closed immediately, and so they should. Unequivocally, they should. And so we got 42 votes, almost 100%. We got 33 likes. If you make it this far, don't forget to give us a thumbs up. It costs us very little and it goes an awful long way. And hopefully, hi everybody, thank you. Hopefully tomorrow we don't get too much. Hopefully we don't get too much snow tomorrow that it wears me out. Hopefully we got power tomorrow night. I'll be back tomorrow night unless we got no power. So I'm just giving you a heads up because we got a blizzard. Gonna have snow tonight. Tomorrow morning the wind's gonna pick up. We're gonna get huge dumps in the morning, in the afternoon, and in the evening. These are gonna be blizzards. I don't mind a snowstorm. I don't like blizzards though, because you're talking about 85 kilometer an hour, 50 mile per hour wind. It's going to be very difficult to keep up with something like that. Okay, have a great night. See everybody. Oh, didn't mean to do that. We'll see everybody hopefully tomorrow night. I'll tell you what, if the power's gone tomorrow night, I'll stream from my cell phone. because I got a 200 gigawatt bandwidth for my cell phone, so I can stream if I want to. Have a great night. Take care, everybody.